recently, the train derailment in East Palestine has garnered national attention because of just the magnitude of this environmental disaster and really the political response as well. And joining me right now is Dr. Melissa Miller, professor of political science at BGSU. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Jaden.
So would you first be able to give me your analysis of the response here in the state level? We saw that Governor Mike DeWine has definitely been having those consistent briefings on this incident. So what are you thinking of that right now?
So, of course, the immediate response really has to come at the local level because the local response is here, it's available. And I think, the state is doing what it can to address the situation, but it's a very complicated situation, in part because it potentially spans two states. East Palestine is on the border of Pennsylvania. And so I know that there are officials and residents of Pennsylvania who are very concerned. And I think the response on the ground from the citizens of East Palestine and in that area seems to be that there's been confusion that they have felt in terms of, is the water safe or is it not safe? Is the air safe or is it not safe? And so you hear the residents saying things like, we've been told it's safe, but we're developing strange rashes and like tingling, burning skin. And so, these kinds of things that are just of huge concern. So we have now seen both the governor and federal officials on the ground. In terms of the federal response, which you didn't ask me yet about, but I'll pivot to that if that's okay. There's a little bit of a complaint that didn't come quickly enough, but the EPA director was on the ground, and I think politically the problem, and this is not the most important problem, let me be clear about that. In terms of the problems created by the derailment in the Norfolk Southern train in East Palestine, the biggest issue should not be political, okay? But that is what I study. And so what I'll tell you is that the Republicans have really been able, I think, to capitalize on the fact that during President Biden's trip to Ukraine, of course, this had happened in East Palestine. The president made a trip to Ukraine, and so the Republicans have been able to sort of juxtapose Biden's visit to Ukraine against East Palestine and saying he hasn't come to East Palestine yet. He's in Ukraine. Where are his priorities and that sort of thing? Now, having said that, it is often the case that presidents do get criticized for this sort of thing. So looking back, some viewers will remember in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, President Bush was not immediately there. And then when he did visit after this devastating hurricane, he flew over initially, and there was a lot of criticism of that. So this is not that uncommon that presidents will be criticized for not being right there, Johnny on the spot. But honestly, presidents of both parties, Bush during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the Biden administration here with this East Palestine situation, will tend to say, we don't want to get in the way. And presidents from both parties have said that sort of thing. If I come to town, there's a giant entourage and it's a huge distraction, and the effort should be on the cleanup and the response.
And President Trump, who of course announced that he will be running again in 2024, did visit the site. So do you think that this is going to help him at all in 2024?
I think certainly President Trump absolutely is trying to capitalize on President Biden not having visited and having been to East Palestine first, if you will. And by first, I mean in terms of first as a presidential candidate. But I do think that the Democrats sort of have something to say about that. So you've heard Democratic leaders criticizing President Trump by saying, it's a lot of the deregulation that happened during the Trump administration that has made conditions less safe, including in the railroad industry. I'll leave it to the policy experts to really, identify those specific policies. But honestly, I think looking broadly at this, it's highly problematic that so much freight and toxic chemicals are moved by rail through the country. And the regulations, they tend to kick in when there's a certain level or threshold that's reached in terms of the amount of toxic freight that is carried. And in my understanding, some of those were not triggered. So what we're going to be seeing, I think, in the coming weeks and months is Norfolk Southern under a very intense microscope. And I hope to see a coordinated Ohio and federal response to this.
That is definitely for sure. Again, railways are federally regulated, so it definitely can be a challenge, especially when you have something like this happen. Dr. Melissa Miller, professor of political science at BGSU, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jaden.